This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 222 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by JP Rindfleisch IX, and we're going to be talking all about story hypothesis and theme. We had just one comment last week, which was from Helen Scheurer, who said, "Thank you for having me on, as always, workwife, and thank you for joining me." Please do leave your comments on the show. Instagram is best. I love to see what you thought of the episode, and we'll always read them out. Okay, so in personal news and updates then, I am recording this on the 20th of December, which is a Wednesday, and I am super close to having finished the book. I'm not quite there. I did want to be editing this week, but, it is what it is. I have slipped a week, and I should be finished in the next couple of days. And then hopefully I will get it edited over the Christmas break, which is not ideal. I didn't want to work over Christmas, but it is what it is. So I will be editing it over the Christmas break, and then hopefully it will go to the editor slightly later than I'd planned, mid to late January. And then hopefully it will be out late February or early March, which is very exciting. So I'll have more news on that very soon. I have just finished my planning for next year. I am working, as I mentioned before, with a new pal with writing sprints, and we have... So look, this is the way it is. If next year goes according to plan and there are no sick kids, no sick adults, no road bumps, speed bumps, things like this, then I'm hoping that maybe I can get 8 books done. It's a very aspirational goal for me. Hugely aspirational. Really, really aspirational. Let me say that again. But what I've done is like a good, better, best, Everest, and like golden win. And so for me, like a good year next year will be 4 books, better year would be 5, best would be 6, Mount Everest goal would be 7, and the golden crown would be 8 books. And that's kind of the way that I'm seeing it, is that like 4 is my minimum. 8 is probably the limit of what I'm capable of. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe if I can outsource a whole bunch of stuff, maybe I could do even more. I don't know. We will have to see. But I have been putting in place quite a lot of plans. I still haven't finished, although I've sort of plotted the production timeline. I've still got a shitload of work to do. I've got multiple, what are they called? Whiteboards in my office where I'm kind of moving projects around and stuff and trying to see what needs to be done in which quarter. So that's exciting me. I love planning. I then mostly ignore the plan and just get on. I don't know if anybody else is like that out there. But I kind of do all this, spend all this time planning and then just completely ignore the plan and just get on with writing, which I think is hilarious. But there we go. So that is me. I will be taking off the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. I probably won't be on social media much. I will just be chilling with family, and then it will be back to the grindstone to get the edits done. But I am hoping I can have a few more days off over in the holidays as well. So in other exciting news, I got my Shopify store sorted. This is for the Ruby Row stuff. You can now order signed copies, which is pretty cool. I'm very excited about this. I'm going to be having some other stuff on there as well, but you'll see that next year as that sort of comes online. And that's some of the plans that I've been trying to put it on my whiteboards. But I'm very excited. I've got some super beautiful photos which came from Kate Hennessy. She is a photographer, an author, and she has a book photography service, and they are fucking stunning. So I will be using her services again next year. So that has been amazing. So that was a bit of a learning curve, I'm not gonna lie. And I haven't got it completely ironed out either. I still need to try and link the Shopify with Instagram so I can tag all my books on there. But I have been working on it, and yeah, what a learning curve. I'm really, really pleased and excited for that. And I think that's probably it on the things that I'm going to tell you that I'm working on, just because there's a few things I'm not quite ready to talk about. Things I am talking about, though, are my next two big kind of teaching opportunities, which are the Patreon Masterclass. We are going to be looking at what it takes to become an Amazon #1 bestseller, both from a traditional author and from an indie author point of view. We're going to be deconstructing their books, their platform, their marketing, their brand, package, pitch, tropes, the whole work. So if you're interested in joining me for a live class for that, then you can join Patreon. And then I'm doing a one-off live Prose in the Market webinar, like workshop, where well, I'm going to tell you right now. So writing to market isn't new, but when teachers talk about it, what they often do is focus on understanding the market, advertising, brand and pitch. But that leaves the writing and the craft of writing to market. So how do you do that? If you're tired of trying to work out how to deliver what readers actually want, then this workshop is for you. I'm going to show you how to deconstruct best-selling books and implement the tools you find. I'm going to give you an easy 3-step methodology for that deconstruction. There are going to be practical examples of deconstruction and how to implement the stuff that you find into your own work. We're going to talk about copywriting, why you're not using it enough and where you should be using it. We're going to discuss how to intentionally slip in TikTokable and marketable scenes into your novels that will hook readers. We're going to talk about the craft of tropes, and there'll be live deconstruction examples using examples from those in the sessions. This will be on Friday the 9th and Saturday the 10th of February. And if you are in the New Zealand, Australia parts of the world, then it will be closer to Sunday the 11th. I think one of the sessions is Sunday the 11th. No, both of them I think are Sunday the 11th. Yeah. And one is Saturday the 8th. All of the information is in the show notes. So if you would like to find out more, then please do click through and find out. And if you have any questions, then drop me a line. Okay, we are super low on Rebel stories. So if you have a Rebel story, please do send it in. You know how I love to read them out. And Becca will shout at me if you don't. So if you have got a story that you've been avoiding giving us, please, now is the time. This week's Rebel is Eden. Eden says, my birthday is in early December, which in the UK is generally dark, cold and wet. To combat the winter blues, I tend to watch Lord of the Rings, the extended versions back to back. For the listeners at home, it's a grand total of 682 minutes or nearly 11 and a half hours. Holy shit. I have not seen those films. I've seen the first 2, I think. Never saw the last one. Whoops. But this year I wanted to do something different, not least because I broke up with my long-term partner and I wanted to get out of the house, so I flew to Rome by myself, which in and of itself is rebellious enough. Anyway, to the rebellion. On my final day in the city, I was doing the usual touristy things, the Colosseum, the Forum, the Pantheon, etc. I was walking back from the Pantheon when someone approached me trying to sell me stuff, something that is unfortunately quite common in Rome. I ignored him and kept walking, but he kept following and pestering me in English. This carried on for a good few minutes and I was getting slowly angrier and angrier. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned and in my best Latin bellowed, I am sacrosanct, unhand me at once. The man froze, not one to lose the initiative when my danders up, I continued in English. I am the Pope's representative in England, and it is sacrilege to touch a priest in such a violent manner. Oh my God, Eden. You legend. At this... Oh my God, this story gets funnier. At this, the man fell to his knees and started mumbling an apology in Italian. I can't tell you exactly what it said, but it sounded consolatory enough. After a few moments of squirming, I said more quietly, go to that church there and ask for Father Nicanor Rayner and sin no more. I waved in the opposite direction to where I was actually headed. There was bound to be a church somewhere around there. With that, he scurried away, and I hurriedly walked the other way before A, he discovered that there was no church nearby, or B, that the father was not a real person, and in fact the priest from 100 years of solitude. Luckily, our paths didn't cross again. Oh, that did make me chuckle. What a hilarious story. I can't believe you did that. That's so funny. Oh dear. See, like, people shouldn't, like, it's one thing to sell. Don't lay your hand on me. I'll fucking break your fingers, okay? Okay, maybe not. Maybe that's a step too far. Maybe I'll just do what Eden did. Anyway, if you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. Now, please do, because we are very, very low. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your Rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. Welcome to new and upped pledges, Renee, Claire Donnelly, and Dana Rousseau. Thank you so, so much. And of course, an enormous thank you to my existing patrons. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, as well as bonus content like the Amazon #1 bestseller masterclass coming up, the movie night that will happen in January in association with that, the Poison and Prose monthly Q&A live sessions that we do together where we write, sprint, and people ask me questions, or the Rebel Slack community where we have well over 100 community members now. And we do a quarterly fight to the death kind of encouragement, enthusiasm, motivation producing community drive towards our goals, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life, so I'm just going to talk about them and then we'll get on with the episode. This episode is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life, Kobo's free, fast and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and their team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help you reach new readers around the world. With this in mind, Kobo has developed a way for authors to reach audiobook listeners with direct audiobook upload. You can now publish an audiobook right in your Kobo Writing Life account, as easily as you can publish an ebook. You can create a customizable table of content, set the price in 16 different currencies, and even set up a pre-order for your audiobook with no date limitations. There's no exclusivity, and you will always have control of your pricing. And once your audiobook is published, there are lots of promotional opportunities. Kobo even have customizable social assets that you can download to share on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and making it even easier for you to reach this growing market. If you're a KWL author and haven't yet got access to the audiobooks tab or the promotional mailing list, email the team at writinglife@kobo.com. That's writinglife@kobo.com, and they'll hook you up. Don't forget you can purchase audiobooks on kobo.com and they will download directly to your free Kobo app or e-reader. If you want to learn more about KWL, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, and find them on social. Create your free account today at kobo.com/writinglife. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm joined by JP Rindfleisch IX. JP is a writer, editor, and podcaster with a penchant for the dark, strange, and queer. They co-authored the paranormal humor book NRDS, National Recently Deceased Services with Jeff Elkins, and the dark urban fantasy series Leah Ackerman alongside A.B. Cohen. JP is also the author of cozy suburban fantasy Mandrake Manor, among other works. JP co-hosts the Writers Inc. podcast and lately has been deeply involved in their local community, fostering a space with over 60 members. Their aim is to uplift local voices, educate emerging writers, assist in getting them published, and connect them with local events and opportunities, showcasing them to a broader audience. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. No, it's great to have you on. So would you like to tell everyone a little bit about you and your journey and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I would say back in 2017, after listening to a billion podcasts, Rachel Herron, Joanna Penn, Jay Thorne, I finally was like, you know what? I can't continue to just listen to podcasts and not have a community. And for me, because you've seen me in your Slack, I talk about community like nobody's business. And so in 2017, I took the leap and I went to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, did something called Rock-a-Pock in the basement with Jay Thorne and about 14 other authors. We created an apocalyptic world and wrote a short story together. And that was really the launching point of going from thinking about writing, about, sort of delving into the craft and attempting to write pieces, into actually learning the craft, bouncing ideas off of people, getting things published. And so I would say that that was really the launching point that delved me into all of these communities and meeting all these wonderful people.
So have you always been a reader, always been a writer, or like is it something that sort of happened as you started listening to these podcasts?
So both. I've always been like a voracious reader. I really didn't go outside a lot. I just like read a lot. And we would take a lot of trips, my family and I, up to like cabins or whatever. And I would be tearing through a book in the back seat. And then in terms of writing, of course, I wrote terrible stories that will never, ever see the light of day. Some of them are written in a weird coded language that I don't remember at all, because apparently I was that finicky about like no one could read this and now I can't.
Yeah.
But but yeah, it was always an interest of mine, but it wasn't necessarily something that like my parents pressed on me, but writing wasn't a career opportunity in my eyes when I was growing up. So I really went down the path of science. I ended up in a degree in biochemistry and really took that route of life for a long time before I realized I could take this journey as well.
Where's your input?
Oh, number one.
Oh,
Oh no, it's number two. Ideation is number one.
okay. I was like listening to you talk. I'm like, if you don't have like top 3 input, I'll eat my fucking hat. That's hilarious. Yep. Oh, I love it. Oh, and the ideation makes so much sense. Like when I've read your writing, I'm like, oh, I can definitely see the ideation. Ideation creates some of the most just rich, spectacularly diverse and different stories that I've ever read. And input as well. They like whenever a writer has input, I can tell because there's these details. It's just about the details that like other writers just don't get. They just don't put them into their stories. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. And I love like now like trying to strength spot for an author for like books that I read. Like I'm obsessed. I'm such a fucking nerd. Anyway, we're not here to talk about strengths. We are here to talk about. Though. Yeah, I know we could be like maybe we on a little bit. We're here to talk about story hypothesis. So this is your latest nonfiction book. So would you like to tell everyone a little bit about what story hypothesis is? How does it kind of connect to theme and needs, and like what is theme, what are needs? Like talk to me about it.
Yeah. So basically for a really long time, I knew that theme had an importance in writing. It's one of like the number 6 things of that were taught in school about story structure, but it's so nebulous that it kills me. I hate the concept of having one of the writing tools be something that is so broad. I use this example a lot, but if you take the theme of love with just a one word, there's such a broad spectrum of that if I wanted a book about love, you could hand me I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head, Timekeeper's Wife or whatever, some really nice heartfelt story, or you could hand me The Fault in Our Stars and I would be really mad at you. So, the fact is like, it's too nebulous for me and it frustrates me because how can I use this tool as a writer if it's so broad and nebulous, but why are we taught it if there isn't an importance to it? So that led me to a lot of conversations with Chris Kane, our wonderful friend. And we
have a lot of mutual friends, actually. Yeah,
do.
So many.
We really do. And I started to realize that theme can be very closely aligned with character wants and needs, and that why make it a difference? Why try to make those two sort of separate concepts, and why not merge them together and really focus on a way to create a clear statement that a writer can use to guide them through a story, through character wants and needs developing throughout that story, and create this resonating tone that hits the reader by the end of it. Because at the end of the day, the stories that we write are filling a need in our readers. It's hitting a certain reason why they're reading it. We read romance because we want that affection need, that connection need in us. So that's why we read those stories, because we want that resonating bell to fill that need within us. We're living vicariously through these stories. So that's why I created story hypothesis, which is just a simple formula someone could use to guide them as they're developing these stories.
So interesting to hear you talk about need and theme and wants all being one and the same. And I think it's really true. I don't think I've ever really thought about it. But it's kind of that nebulous thing as you've described it, because the want is very obvious, but the need is not very obvious. And so, the need, we almost have to we infer it from the subtext in the story, right? Which is why it's so intangible and so hard to grab onto. So, like, why do you hate Maslow?
Oh man, I really do, don't I?
I really do.
Oh, to be fair, Chris King really drove me to hate Maslow, and I think it was with reason.
So let's first explain who Maslow is and why we're cackling about it.
Yeah, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a pyramid of needs, base level being like food, shelter, physical needs, and it all leads up this pyramid into self-actualization, into who you are as a person. And based off of the papers written by Maslow, which this is outside of writing, this is someone's construct of what human needs in the real world need in order to attain self-actualization. Now, the levels and why it's a pyramid is because you can't attain the next level until you fulfill the needs of the bottom level. Well, here's the big problem. And the reason why this became a topic of conversation is a lot of writers in my writing circle were using Maslow's needs. And I was using it trying to understand certain character needs in books, but it wasn't fitting all the time and it wasn't working all the time. And so I felt like I was shoehorning in the hierarchy of needs into what I wanted it to look like. And why was my big question there. So a lot of conversation. And what we discovered is Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very focused on a lot of Western culture, a lot of self-attainment, a lot of, getting to know who you are as a person, but those don't represent a lot of cultures around the world. A lot of cultures around the world are more focused on community-focused aspects and attaining sort of a connection with other people. Another really big frustration of mine with Maslow's is that the bottom level needs is sex. One of them is just physical sex, but yet the middle of the pyramid is actual human connection and love. And that is problematic to me. I don't like that. It feels icky. So more or less, I started to question, like, why are we using this hierarchy of needs if it doesn't reflect all cultures? And is there another way to find another method that could work, that we don't have to shoehorn in what we believe into this model if this model doesn't work?
Is Maslow using sex like as a synonym for reproduction in order to keep humanity alive? Or is he using it as like the pleasurable fun side of
well, that's the strange thing. Why have a pyramid that at the end of the day goes to self-actualization, an individual's need, if at the base level it's physical sex, right? Why? Like that's kind of strange to me. But maybe it is in terms of reproductive need, and that is sure. But at the same part, that's very strange to me. I don't know if it really fits with a lot of the models for other cultures.
Well, yeah, and it also assumes that one needs to reproduce and one does not.
Yeah.
If every single individual on the planet reproduced, we would be overpopulated very quickly.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing that really frustrated too was a lot of creatives that we respect and that we hold to a high degree in when they were growing up, they didn't have the means to really attain those first base level needs, but yet they created such beautiful works that how can you argue that they had self-actualization if they couldn't feed themselves? And that's why that model just seems so broken to me. It doesn't seem like it reflects all of humanity. It seems like it reflects this one guy's view of a certain collective of people that have all the means that they could have.
Yeah, and I also and as awful as this truth is, I do feel like some of our most emotionally harrowing, like beautiful in air quotes, art comes
Hmm.
from pain,
Yeah.
or comes from experiences that have left a scar on us that aren't, they're not always those happy memories. Obviously, a lot of beautiful art also comes from happy memories, but
Hmm.
like arguably being in that level of pain is not like having your needs met, right? So, yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. So, who should we like?
I really personally like Manfred Max-Neef. He's a Chilean economist, um, and he basically was looking at how can I measure our country's overall success in a population without looking at financials, because he felt like financial freedom and all of those aspects with money wasn't reflecting true happiness or true satisfaction within a population. And so he created these 9 needs, fundamental needs that he believed that people needed to attain within not only themselves, but within like their community in order to measure what sort of success they had within that country. And he realized that these needs could be expanded to other countries. It could be a useful measurement. One of the really nice things about this is that those 9 needs, they they correlate to each other. They tie to each other, but they're not driven in a way that you must attain one to get to the other. You can pick and choose, which in terms of writing is perfect because then everything is a level playing field and you can pick which ones are appropriate for you at that time.
And what are the 9 needs? Tell me more.
Yeah, so they are affection, creation, freedom, idleness, participation, sustenance, protection, identity, and understanding.
So talk me through like how to approach these, like how, like, okay, so let's use affection, right? Because it's
Yeah,
romance, I'm assuming is it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
very
yeah,
common theme and genre. How, okay, so my character needs affection.
yeah.
So what? Talk to me about how I can use this. Like, how do I approach understanding like affection and like connecting that to character need and the theme?
Yeah. Yeah. So to give away the story hypothesis formula, it's a character's need for their initial want leads them to fulfill their true need by developing this developing need. So in terms of affection, especially in romance, it would be very likely that you would be fulfilling that need for your reader and for your characters, either through the developing need or through that final true need. Now, the difference is a character who is developing their affection throughout the story is building this stronger relationship with the character. And then by the end of it, they may get something out of it. They may get a freedom. They may get a newfound protection. They may discover who they truly are by the end of the story. And then you get that, like, oh, this love that has been driven throughout this whole story has led to this character knowing who they truly are. And now they can be, I don't know, queen of whatever. Or this character has been sort of working, maybe headbutting this other person, has been kind of focused more on protection throughout this whole story. But by the end of it, like 75% through the story, bam, affection. Like we're together, we know what true love looks like, we are here, we feel happy, and we feel that final resonation with an affection. But that's how you can look at these different needs and you can pick where they would fit within this formula based off of where in the timeline of your story that bell or that tolling feel exists.
Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail about those wants and needs. So in the
Yeah.
book, you talk about how like the journey that you've mentioned and how like characters develop and kind of continuums, and you put them on continuums of initial want versus external want, true need versus internal need, developing need, driving catalyst.
Yeah.
So can you maybe explain what those terms mean in a bit more detail?
Yeah.
And sort of like, I guess, where we see them in the story, like do they align with story structure? Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about that.
Do you want to break down the Matrix?
Yeah. That's like one of my themes.
Okay.
Of course I do.
Okay, so I might have prepared just a little bit for this. So um but when we look at something like the first movie, The Matrix, Neo's need to understand what is the Matrix, his primary initial question, leads him to fulfill his identity, who Neo is in terms of the Matrix, by developing his participation, his connection to everyone that is these outsider groups of people. So immediately, right off the bat, looking at that type of story, think about how the Matrix, the movie, flows. Initially, Neo wants to know this big question: what is the Matrix? He just wants to understand. He's not saying, who am I? He's saying, I need to know what all this weird mystery is. And then by about halfway through, and I have to find out where exactly that fits, but let's say Showdown of Agent Smith, Neo shows off these skills. He's hinting at a true potential. And that death moment, which death moments, I think I picked this from like writing from the middle. But it's a moment where either you have a physical death, a emotional death, or psychological death. But we really have Morpheus dying, and that catalyzes Neo's journey from a passive observer of being like, not who am I in correlation to the Matrix, but what is the Matrix is his big question up until about 50% of the way through. But now it's, who am I in participation with the Matrix? Because now Morpheus has died, and that's catalyzing me. I now have true potential that I see that about 50% of the way through, that is showing me that I'm something more. So now we've driven from his need for understanding, which has really pulled him through this story until about halfway through, to a shift into, who am I truly? What's my true identity? And all through that, the through line piece, which is you have the initial want, you have the true need. That through line piece is participation. It's how much does he react with the people, with Trinity, with Morpheus, with the team on the ship, and how much of the push and pull is driving him through that story. Every time that he seems to push away from participation, every time that he tries to get away, tries to push against, he's going to fail, because it's not participation. And we see that when he doesn't answer right off the bat in the beginning, when he doesn't answer the phone in time, when he's trying to escape, but he's not listening fully because he's not actively participating. He's kind of in the middle of escaping, but not trusting. He gets caught because he doesn't understand that he needs to fully participate. And so we keep seeing these failures and wins based off of his developing need through the story.
That's so interesting. So do you feel that some of these Max-Neef needs align better with heroes' journeys versus heroine journeys?
Yes-ish. I think that there's a lot to say about genre, because people go to genres for certain reasons. We go to coming of age stories because at the end of the day, we want identity, really, right? We want to know who we are. And so we're living vicariously through other people who are coming of age and who are discovering who they are. Or they're coming of age and they're discovering their role in a community. Again, participation. Could also be affection, but really when we go to those types of stories, there's more weight on what needs exist there. Heroes' journeys. So a hero journey really focuses less on community. So it would be less likely that it would focus on something like participation. It might focus more on something like freedom, or protection, maybe, and identity. Whereas a heroine's journey, which focuses more on bringing that collective understanding back to a community, would focus more on participation, understanding, and romance, affection, all of those different sorts of things. And you can sort of see where things fall in based off of their genre.
Okay, so where do we start? Let's say somebody has already outlined a book that they're due to start tomorrow, but they haven't overlaid Max-Neef's needs. what would they do? Like, how do we understand which need it really is? How can you go back and check yourself, like before you start writing? Asking for a friend.
Oh, just a friend.
Just a friend, yeah.
So I've used this formula at the start of the whole process and during editing of the whole process. So Mandrake Banner, I actually created the formula first and I wrote it on the board behind me, and then I semi-pantsed Mandrake Banner, but I always had that formula behind me. What I did was a mix of a couple things. One thing is I really love doing blank media meets blank media. So for example, Mandrake's Manor to me is Charmed meets HBO's Looking. Well, I can already pick out what those pieces are. We have urban fantasy, we have romance, and kind of like a discovery phase. Well, I can already see what that means. Romance, affection, obviously. We have people discovering that they're witches because it's Charmed. So obviously that's identity. Well, I've just changed their identity. So now they need to discover who that is. And then based off of the story and how it flows, I know that they're going into a new community, that they need to understand their role in that community. So it's broader than just identity, but it's understanding. So I found those three needs that I can really highlight through that story based off of what I'm sort of comping the story to look like. I mean, if you, based off of how much information you want to tell me about your outline, we can always pick apart what I think those needs would be.
Okay. I'm trying to think of like a comp. I'm trying to, so I would say it's like maybe Sapphic Vampire Diaries meets John Wick.
Okay. So protection, affection, Sapphic Vampire Diaries meets. Do you have characters that discover that they're something, or do you have
Yes.
characters that know they're okay? So then identity. So it'd probably be affection, protection, and identity would be intermixed in there.
Interesting. I definitely think identity is in there. It's like yeah, that's so spooky that you can do that. I kind of
But
weirded out.
if you think about it, I mean, so I only picked affection off of Sapphic. More than likely, it's a romance of some
Yes.
sort, right?
Yes.
So it's pretty obvious. It's going to exist in there.
Mhm.
John Wick, immediately think of someone who is either on a route of revenge or is on a route of like needing to protect something because they potentially lost something, or they have this like loss of safety and security, so they need that protection fulfilled in them. So that's why I pull out a protection right away. And then identity is, I mean, if you have characters who are discovering that they are something, then they need to know who they are because they've shifted, and they need to rediscover that alignment. And then based off of that, if I were looking at those three needs, I would say, what is your final tolling bell? And it will probably either be affection as your true need or your developing need. And that depends on like how much love are you intermixing in this story.
What do you mean final tolling bell?
So sorry, there's a loud siren.
It's all right.
So final tolling bell, what I mean is love or affection driving the story? Is it something that you are using as a tool that these two characters are coming together, and every time they come together they succeed at whatever their goal is? Or are they more focused on protecting each other, and then by the end of the story they're protected enough that they can be together?
So I think it's probably the identity and affection more than protection, because the protection stuff aligns more with the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes to fruition very much in the last book. It's a trilogy. It's the same couple.
Yeah.
So like some of these, like it's difficult to say that there's a tolling bell in book one, because obviously that the romance is not complete in book one. Because the romance doesn't get complete until book three. But yeah, I would say either like, I mean, it's a romance, so it has to be affection, right? But like thematically, I would say it's thematically, I would say maybe identity.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
and that can work because you can have a developing affection in the middle of it that could potentially underlie it. But what that mean it doesn't mean that they fully gain their full affection connection, like they're happily ever after together. It just means that that's a need that's getting fulfilled as we develop through the story,
Yeah,
and you
like
can keep
they
playing with it as the stories continue.
yeah, that like that's definitely it. Like the all of this goes throughout the three. It will all come to fruition like in book three, but they are opposite sides of a coin. And
Hmm.
so then they need each other in a way to fulfill the self-actualization,
Yeah.
because each one shows the other that like yeah, this one's strength is the other's weakness in a way. So like they show
Yeah.
each other like how to embrace, I guess, the other side. Yeah, if that makes sense. Ah, this is very
Yeah.
interesting. Um, okay, so how can we use like these needs and themes to kind of like raise the stakes and conflict in the story?
Yeah. So one of the big things about this is, a formula is great and nice, but it's not helpful if you can't use it. So one of the reasons why I have this is because it can tell me where in the story these certain needs are heightened. And then when I'm reading through or editing, if I feel like a scene isn't working, more than likely it's not aligned with the formula. So let's take, for example, Hunger Games, which Hunger Games, Katniss's need for protection leads her to fulfill freedom by developing participation. In my understanding of the story, so really in that beginning part of the story, she's very focused on protection. She puts her sister as number one in terms of protection, even before herself. She must do everything she can to protect her sister. So that's why she volunteers, because she will give up her freedom, which she doesn't recognize that as a true need at the moment, because she would rather protect her sister than herself at that moment. And that's like a self-sacrificial moment at that part of the story. If she didn't do that, and I had that written down and I was like, something's wrong here, I would look at my hypothesis and I would say, Katniss's need for protection leads her to fulfill freedom, et cetera, et cetera. But I would be like, this is the beginning of the story, and she's not willing to volunteer. And so she's letting her sister go. But up until this point, I've established that her sister has this need, like it fulfilling need for Katniss to protect her sister at all costs. Well, I have just broken the protection need. So obviously, I need to do something there. I need her to protect her sister. So she's going to volunteer. So that's why I like to use this formula and think about where in the story we are and where they are on their journey of shifting from their initial need want into this true need phase, and how I can look at where certain parts aren't working and really punch it up. Another thing is the developing need, why I have this third need that exists in the middle. That's the one I can play with. That's the one that tells me when they don't use this need or when they push against this need, they're not going to get what their initial want is or what their true need is. I'm going to use that as like my toy or the thing I'm dangling in front of them. Like with Neo, when he doesn't participate, he's not going to get understanding or he's not going to get identity because he's not participating. And until he participates, he won't be able to get whatever his true needs are. And now, why I have the initial want up until about 50% is because about 50% through the story, in Western storytelling, more than likely they fulfill this true initial want, but then they don't feel fulfilled because, yeah, I can get all the understanding I want about the Matrix, but I've just shown that I have these super cool powers. So great that the world around me, I can kind of understand it, but now who the hell am I? What am I supposed to do? So now I'm on a new journey almost. I'm on this new terms of self-discovery because I no longer feel fulfilled in that initial want. So that's how I use this formula in different phases of the story to really ask the question of like, am I hitting these feels?
Yeah, so that I really like that. explanation kind of helped me understand a bit deeper. Definitely the one that I play with is identity. And when they don't fulfill the identity that they really are, they don't win,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so that
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. So I really like that. Okay. What are kind of the key scenes or beats that we need to hit in order to like successfully embed these kind of themes and needs in our story?
Yeah. So, like I had said, about 50% of the way through in Western storytelling, we usually have this sort of death moment or whatever you want to call it, where a character gets that initial want, but they don't feel fulfilled. So that's really what you're writing up to about halfway through your story. Um, Going up to that point, we have a lot of like playing with this developing need, and we get a lot of this sort of resistance where a character might not want to acknowledge their initial want, and so they basically are getting pushed out of their comfort zone, and it's catalyzing them to move forward because they're resisting against this, and they get no choice. They're on a journey. We have these failure scenes that exist, and this is a good way to show when they aren't pulling on their developing needs. So for you, when they aren't pulling on their identity, they're going to fail. We have it in the beginning and we have it at the end. When they have it at the beginning, they're failing against their initial want. When they have it at the end, they're failing against their true need. And so it looks a little different, but it's still the same. It's these ups and downs that we expect through the story to help them develop and understand more. We also have these like false wins where our characters think that, they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing with their identity, but it's wrong, it's twisted, it's contorted in a way, and so they still fail. And that's another way to kind of play with your characters and have them misunderstand something up until the point where they hit that like 50% of the way through and they attain their initial want, and then oops, they they didn't want that in the first place. And after about 50% of the way through, once we hit this moment where we have these characters that attained what they wanted, but now they're left with this like feeling like they need more, that's really when they start to delve deeper into this developing need. So for Neo, he needs to understand who he is more. He's going to really dig into his community, his people around him to figure out and help him. His participation need is going to get picked up and he's going to really learn that piece. And so we have a lot of these like trials where he's using this developing need to really start to focus on his true identity. I think I can't remember where it is in the story, but they really push him to the limits. I think that's more in the beginning, but I think they do it again where he's now ready to do it and he's ready to attain more strength and more power, get uploaded more. We have different confrontation scenes, obviously at the end. Like these really align with a lot of story beats. And we hit this confrontation scene near the end where we have all the tools we needed. We've fully developed our identity in your case, and now we are ready for a true need. And now we have the tools that we've used during this whole journey. Now is our time to get our true final need.
What are some of the like biggest mistakes you see writers making, like around these needs and themes, and either trying to use them or like failing to do that?
I think putting too many too many needs. So Max-Neef pulled out 9 fundamental human needs. Taking outside the storytelling concept, those 9 needs are 9 needs that you and I have on a daily basis. We pull on different ones. They all have different fuel gauges. But when we're able to look at story and we're able to really focus on like why we're telling the stories that we want to tell, if we're able to pull on these specific needs, I picked 3 because I felt like that was a good developing way to hit that final true need at the end of the story, then we connect deeper with our readers because we're fulfilling a single strong need in them. One thing that I notice or one thing that I see is a lot of people trying to add in multiple needs or multiple wants in a character. But if you can really refine and pick one need in your initial want, one need in your true need, and one need in your developing need, and really hone in on why a character would use this need, I feel like you can create this stronger resonation with a reader.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like personality traits, right? Like the more personality traits you try and give a character, the less depth we get on them. And actually, you know, the deeper you go with that kind of one characteristic trait or whatever, the more believable it becomes, because the more layers and like sides of that trait we see, I suppose. So, yeah. Okay, what are some tips for getting your characters to kind of embody that theme on page? How do we show the needs and the theme on page without bashing our readers around the head with it?
Well, I think that this comes again to my media meets media or whatever kind of comp thing. I develop the hypothesis based off of character. One of the big things about story hypothesis is that it focuses on character wants and needs. So it's so intrinsically tied to your character that they develop together. And I think a big thing is that your hypothesis could change if you're writing it and you're like, oh, this character needs to take a new path. There's nothing hard set in stone until you hit publish. So calm down. But one of the big things for me is when I'm developing a story, let's say Mandrake Manor, Charmed meets HBO's Looking, I have these archetypes. One of the reasons why I picked Charmed was I have in Charmed, there are three sisters, while in mine, there are three main characters who are witchy, more or less, who are so intrinsically tied to each other that they function like siblings. And then they have these relationships with people in the neighborhood. So I can see their personality traits through the archetypes that I've created, pulled from Charmed, and I can see through those personality traits that affection is a big, strong need in them. They have this sleazy-esque personality about them, and that's why affection is such a strong characteristic in them. They discover that they are witches. Who the hell wouldn't ask, who am I now? What am I now? So really, it's using that identity need and then reflecting it back on that character and having these unique character voices that are going to ask the who am I question, but in different ways. So it's a big interplay in character and initial character wants and needs.
What characters don't meet their needs?
It's a great question. What characters don't meet their needs? So I think, are you asking in terms of storytelling when a main character doesn't meet their needs?
I think so. And I suppose really the question is like, is a villain because they don't meet their needs?
I think so. I think that's a fair question to ask. I think a villain in terms of a non I was about to use dialogue doctor lingo and I chose not to. Non main character, or non POV character, but a villain as a character who exists as just a pseudo secondary character that is basically the antagonist of the story. They're more than likely not going to meet those needs, and that's probably a good reflection against your primary character. One of the things with story hypothesis that I like to do is reflections, and this is a good way of building character profiles around your character. So let's say that you have a character who needs to, their initial want is identity, their true need is affection. Well, you can have reflections of your side characters who really know who they are, who are unsure of who they are, all these pieces that reflect your main character by having these different needs in different scales. And then you can also have characters who are hyper affectionate or who have their affection need fulfilled at the beginning to show reflections to your main character of who they are meant to be. And then in terms of villains, you can pull on that. What happens when they don't have their needs? What happens when those needs are twisted and broken? Participation is a perfect one. For villains, participation might look like control. Participation might be, instead of a community around you, you're controlling and you're you are pulling on that community in a way that's harmful. And so you can see these broken needs that are taken up by villains.
And what about morally grey protagonists?
I think that it's something that I would love to explore, because like I said, the broken needs are those things I hadn't explored yet until a lot of people started asking me questions about it. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds fun. And I think that there's something to say with morally gray protagonists meeting certain needs and having poor or twisted reflections of needs. And I think I would like to explore that more in something in the future.
I want to read that book. So if you could just
okay.
Yeah, cool,
I'll get on it.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
Okay. So I think I've told this story before. I have. But I write as a form of protest. So I write because before I went on the 2017 adventures, I was moving up the corporate ladder. And as I was moving up the corporate ladder, one of the things I needed to do was take a supervisory skills course. And in this supervisory skills course, we were basically learning all these tools or in corporate, whatever jargon that you needed to in order to become a supervisor. And one day we had to write down what we didn't have time for. And we were jotting it all down. Everyone's writing down like, oh, I don't have time to do laundry. I don't have time to watch my kids. I'm over here writing, I don't have time to write. I don't have time to do art. And I'm like, okay, these are things that I want to do, but I never have time to do them. I'm so like stuck doing all of this coursework and all of this stuff to try and move up this ladder. Well, timer goes off and the instructor has us go to the front of the class and we have to read these off, except instead of saying I don't have time for, we have to say I don't want to. So I had to say out loud, I don't want to write and I don't want to do art. And oh my God, I got so mad. I was like shaking angry because I was like, that's not true. And I had to take a moment and I was like, hold on. Like the reason I don't have time for this is because I've let this side of my life consume me in a way that is so aggravating to me because it's not what I want to do. And so that moment I was so pissed off and I was like, there's no way in hell. So I dove into as much as I could, and it's taken a long time. It's not like the next day I quit my job and I went and wrote, but it's something that I continually remember. And I'm like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Are you full-time now?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Still getting there, but
yeah. But now you're actively making the time and you don't get to write. Yeah. I don't have time for. Yep. That is such a horrific exercise. I'm like deeply uncomfortable hearing you say that was what they made you do. Like, oh my God. Like that's such a like shell shock moment, like of realization, like what a tool to have in your back pocket to make people really wake up to the reality of what they are doing to themselves. I think that is shocking. I mean, I think for me, like I don't have time to rest, but actually I could quite happily say I don't want to rest.
Yeah, same here.
Yes, exactly. I'm happy to say that one. Anyway, amazing. Tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, and anything else you'd like to add.
I'll make it easy, and everyone can find me at storyhypothesis.com. That's actually a redirect to my main website. So if you want to learn more, you can always look at the menu header, but that makes it easy. So I'll just say that.
Perfect. And I will leave all like links and bits and bobs in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, a big thank you to the show's listeners and the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to JP Rindfleisch IX, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. So I am wishing you all a wonderful New Year's, and I hope that it is full of celebrations, goals, joy, happiness, and hope for the future. Join join me next week when I will be interviewing Angela J. Ford, and we will be speaking all about how to create beautiful books, how to sell book boxes, and how to sell direct. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.